Yeah, it's been an interesting last few years. So to see it come together, but I'm very, very proud, as are the guys. We're very proud of the record.
What images or thoughts go into your head when you hear John Bon Jovi's name? Although you may be familiar with John Bon Jovi as the famed lead singer of the rock band Bon Jovi, you may be surprised to learn that he has been coping with a devastating and heartbreaking issue behind the scenes of his fame. John has had to overcome many obstacles, both professionally and personally, from the start. Nothing, though, has ever been more personal or meaningful than his current health fight and devastating diagnosis. The renowned John Bon Jovi has been diagnosed with what devastating condition? Come with us as we delve into the tragic details. The legendary John Bon Jovi came into this world in New Jersey in 1962 as John Francis Bon Jovi Jr. He came from humble beginnings. Both of his parents were veterans, and his dad was a barber and a former Marine. The love of music that John felt at an early age did not fade. He was an avid participant in school talent shows and music competitions, where he showcased his singing and instrumental abilities. Even when he was a teenager, his skill was obvious to everyone around him. John got his start performing in local bands in 1974. That was also the year he created Ray, his first band. David Bryan, who would go on to join the legendary Bon Jovi band, was a member of his second band, Atlantic City Expressway, which he established when he was 16 years old. Making it big in the music industry wasn't simple, unfortunately, despite his skill. John made many unsuccessful attempts to secure record agreements in the early 1980s. He was informed by many record labels that his music was inadequate, or that there were already too many bands in the rock genre. Do you have any idea how terrible this must have been for John, who was attempting to make it big in the music business? The silver lining is that John kept going. He was so sure of his ability to achieve greatness that he resolved to work hard to realize his ambition. Did you know that while waiting for his music to get attention, John cleaned floors as a janitor at a New York recording studio? He worked odd jobs to save up enough money to be ready for his big break, which would come one day. At long last, it transpired. He eventually got a local DJ to play his song Runaway on the air after he recorded it. The song's unexpected success caught the attention of producers and record firms who had previously disregarded him. This was a significant milestone for John. Bon Jovi, from childhood to stardom. Even though it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, this was only the first of many obstacles. After deciding he wanted to start a band, John contacted several of his favorite musicians, including guitarist Richie Sambora, bassist Alec John, drummer Tico Torres, and keyboardist David Bryan. They formed Bon Jovi as a group. With the goal of becoming famous, they set off on a journey, performing anywhere they could. Nevertheless, the trip was not without its challenges. Guitarist Richie Sambora recently discussed the difficulties the band had in its early days in an interview. During the time we were keeping the Fahrenheit record, we were all staying in the same Philadelphia apartment and sleeping on the floor in sub-zero temperatures. The band persevered and kept playing music despite the early difficulties they encountered, such as the broken heater and the poor food supply in the fridge. Their 1986 sophomore album, Slippery When Wet, came out at a period when they were already widely recognized as international superstars. The name Bon Jovi was in every magazine, on every TV show, and at every sold-out concert throughout the globe. Stadiums were crowded with fans everywhere they went, and their music was at the top of the charts. However, there were reasons to doubt the success. The music industry was undergoing transformation as tensions grew. After nearly a decade of non-stop activity, Bon Jovi set out on a punishing world tour from 1988 to 1990 in the wake of New Jersey's enormous success. There was almost any downtime on the tour, which featured nearly 230 gigs across several countries. They gave it their all every night for the thousands of shouting fans that watched them perform. But away from the spotlight, fatigue was setting in. The band as a whole felt the immense strain that came with their newfound success, but John, as the group's leader and the one who had first brought them together, felt it to an even greater degree. John was a bit too severe on himself since he felt much more responsible to the band. Because of how awful things were, John was emotionally and physically exhausted by the early 1990s. He was utterly worn out by the never-ending cycle of touring and marketing, which required him to play non-stop, compose songs, and oversee the band's operations. The exhaustion reached a point where he was barely able to move. There was a mental and emotional burden in addition to the bodily toll. Remaining at the top, consistently releasing popular songs, and upholding the reputation of a rock legend was an unending burden. The record label wanted fresh songs, the audience wanted more, and John felt he couldn't stop. So the band and he kept performing even though they were exhausted. What the audience didn't realize, though, was that he had hit a deadly degree of fatigue. John started to feel emotionally drained when things got very nasty. Suicide was even a thought that crossed his mind. On his way to visit a psychotherapist in 1991, he was in such much emotional agony that he considered leaping out of the moving automobile. Looking back, he reflected, "I was as low as I could imagine myself being at that difficult time. As I drove through California, I drank, felt terrible, wanted to get treatment, and even considered leaping out of my car. I appeared to be in a state of crisis. It stripped me of everything I loved until I regained control. I hated it." Then it occurred late one night. As usual, John strode energetically onto the platform, prepared to wow the crowd with a performance they would never forget. Everything appeared normal as the music blasted and the audience went electric. Still, an uneasy feeling persisted throughout the performance. There was a noticeable change in his normal physiological response. He was experiencing unusually heavy legs, labored breathing, and a foggy mind. His years-long buildup of fatigue eventually caught up with him, despite his best efforts to ignore it and persuade himself he had to simply keep going. Midway through the performance, John's strength failed him. He started to slide, and his teammates quickly rushed over to help. He was unable to continue and had collapsed. The music ceased as members of the crew and security removed him from the stage. Fearful and perplexed, the crowd watched as their beloved rock star was led off stage. Despite the efforts of the backstage medics who were monitoring his pulse in an effort to aid in his recovery, his body was entirely exhausted from performing non-stop for so long. John couldn't avoid facing the reality that he wasn't unbeatable after that night. The years of overexertion had finally taken their toll on his body, and he needed rest to recover. It made him realize he needed to take it easy before he went down the drain. As soon as the tour came to a close, the band members finally got some much-needed relaxation after years on the road. They were physically apart, but the mental and emotional strain of their relentless work schedules had already begun to show. The damage was done, and some band members began to wonder if they could keep up this speed. More tragic fissures within the band emerged at this point. Despite taking a hiatus from touring, band disputes and an impending dissolution surfaced. The years of non-stop effort had built up so much pent-up stress that it was too late to undo the harm, even after a break from the relentless touring. A horrific dispute between longtime musical collaborators Jon Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora startled fans and the public at large. The quarrel reportedly sprang from artistic disagreements, weariness, and strain on the band. It was in the early 80s when Jon Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora first crossed paths. Richie brought an extra dimension to the song with his natural talent and guitar abilities, while Jon had the vision, desire, and ambition to become famous. They were instrumental in making Bon Jovi become a legendary rock band. They lived the life of a rock star for a long time, created songs together, and were unstoppable. Their relationship was more than that of a vocalist and a guitarist. It was a fraternity, and fans embraced it. However, weaknesses began to show up in the background as time passed. From the beginning, Jon had been Bon Jovi's de facto leader, dictating the group's overall course, managing the band's finances, and making all the major decisions. Contrarily, Ritchie frequently felt that his voice wasn't getting the attention it deserved, despite his essential role in the music. On a more personal note, Ritchie had problems with substance misuse. He beat them, but the stresses of touring and performing still took their toll. He was becoming increasingly exhausted and longed for more quality time with his daughter, Ava. At the same time, John, who was just as weary, was determined to keep going at full pace. He yearned to maintain the band's momentum, record more albums, and continue traveling. He showed no signs of slowing down, and tensions were rising as a result of their divergent agendas. Bon Jovi's Because We Can tour was underway in 2013. Their legion of devoted followers were anticipating another mesmerizing performance from the legendary band. However, Ritchie vanished without a trace. His absence from a concert in Calgary, Canada was unexplained and unannounced. Some fans were perplexed. Could he be ill? Was it an unexpected situation? That was unknown. Ritchie had quit, which was an unexpected and tragic revelation. Some said he had relapsed into substance misuse, while others said he had been sacked. However, Ritchie clarified afterwards that he was unable to continue. He needed a break for his own emotional and physical health from the relentless touring, the stress, and the strain on his personal life. John was not amused by Ritchie's explanation, even if some of the fans got it. He felt wounded and furious since Ritchie had seemingly left the band and him. No matter what, he thought Ritchie would be by his side to keep going. But Ritchie had decided differently. Things took a turn for the worse once Ritchie departed. What started as a private relationship escalated into a public dispute, further crushing the supporters' hearts. John made some alarming statements in interviews when things reached a breaking point, claiming that Ritchie had departed because he was unable to manage the workload. Ritchie had disappointed the band and their followers, and he had made a selfish decision, he said. But Ritchie shot back, claiming he was entitled to walk away as he had given Bon Jovi his all for 30 years. His daughter, not another tiresome trip, was his first concern. He made it plain. Jon Bon Jovi was severely impacted by their animosity, which led to a period of silence that lasted for years. "It was a very, very difficult time that I haven't fully rebounded from yet," John stated in an interview he gave in 2016 when asked about the conflict's effect on him. For the record, he said, "There was never any fight, there was never any animus. He was never fired. It was never about that." His wife, though, has been an incredible support system. He says he would not have been able to handle things without her. "We were in the midst of our tour when Sambora suddenly quit in Calgary in 2013, with 80 sold-out concerts still ahead of them. But the train continued on moving since he had some difficulties to deal with. He finally decided he didn't want to be a part of our road crew anymore, so he left." The loss of Ritchie was heartbreaking for the audience. Something was lacking from Bon Jovi when John and Ritchie lost their chemistry. Things were different, even though the band persisted. Everyone wanted the two guys to get back together so they could mend their relationship, but they were both too obstinate to budge. Surprisingly, Bon Jovi were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2018, and Ritchie got back on stage with them for a single night after a 5-year hiatus. It was much like the good old days when John and Ritchie shared the stage and performed together, complete with smiles and laughter. In the minds of the fans, this heralded the arrival of a full reunion. Nevertheless, Ritchie departed from the band following that performance. He expressed his contentment with his life away from Bon Jovi. Even though he didn't want to return, he still felt admiration for what they had accomplished. This was a watershed event in Jon Bon Jovi's career, but it pales in comparison to the devastating news of his current illness, which has devastated both him and his fans. In 2022, John's struggle with voice cord degeneration was evident. Fans noticed a shift in Jon Bon Jovi's performances. His once powerful voice, which had characterized successes like "Livin' on a Prayer," now sounded strained and weaker than before. Even though he was having trouble reaching some notes, he could still play fairly effectively. Since John and his band had been working non-stop for decades with little pauses in between albums and tours, fans and even John himself initially assumed it was simply exhaustion from touring. Even after getting enough sleep, the issue persisted and even worsened. John started to have trouble hitting the high notes he used to effortlessly during live performances. Singing at a lower note or even skipping over some vocal passages was something he had to work on. His voice had changed, and fans began to notice. Some people assumed it was just the natural course of things, as no performer can have a flawless voice forever. But deep down, John knew it wasn't simply the effects of becoming older. He could sense that something major was transpiring. An upsetting truth was staring him in the face. His voice cords were failing. When a singer's voice goes, it's as if a piece of themselves goes with it. You are who you are through it. It's more than a skill. It was devastating for John to see his career crumble because he had relied on his voice for everything. In 2022, following a performance in Nashville, things started to change. John went immediately to his wife Dorothea for criticism after the concert, since he thought he had given a breathtaking performance. She informed him that his performance was subpar and that his voice sounded altered, which was a very honest and worrisome answer. Worse yet, criticism was savage when footage of the performance went viral online. Some even suggested he resign, while others questioned his public silence on the topic. Although his wife's confession was a terrible blow, it ultimately served to motivate him to face his physical condition head-on and think about his professional future. After a battery of medical exams, John finally had his answers. His doctors diagnosed him with vocal atrophy, a disorder that weakens the muscles and tissues that make up the vocal folds and makes it difficult to utilize one's voice. As a result of one cable being noticeably thicker and the other weakening, John's sound was wrong throughout his performances. John was emotionally devastated and overwhelmed with thoughts after receiving this prognosis, which came as a shock. John said he even started to doubt God at one point because he couldn't imagine living without singing, which he saw as his life's fundamental function. "I take great satisfaction in the fact that I was a real singer," he said precisely in an interview. "I've spent the last 4 decades honing my singing skills, and I've even performed with Pavarotti. As a stylist, I can do more than yell and scream. I can really sing. Therefore, I failed to comprehend God's rationale for removing my skill. Nothing has ever gone up my nose but my finger, so I'm just making that up." John opted to battle his diagnosis rather than face the devastating prospect of retirement. Following consultation with medical professionals, he had vocal fold medialization surgery in June 2022. This operation had the potential to realign his voice cords and allow him to pursue his passion. It was neither easy nor quick to get back on one's feet. John had to make vocal workouts a daily habit and collaborate closely with vocal instructors. Vocal cord injuries, in contrast to those affecting a limb, are extremely delicate and may need specialized attention, time, and perhaps surgery. Restoring his vocal power required John to concentrate on breathing exercises and methods, and he even discovered new strategies to prevent more harm to his voice. The devastating truth that he may never again sound exactly as he did in the 80s or 90s was another expectation he had to alter. That being said, he was still free to sing as much as he liked. John took comfort in the fact that Shania Twain, another musician, had gone through a comparable ordeal at this difficult time. Her words of encouragement and direction gave him hope and gave him the will to persevere through the ordeal. In the middle of the year 2024, John started to get his voice back. He started his slow comeback to live performance with a show in Nashville, and in June of 2024, Bon Jovi celebrated 40 years in the business with the release of Forever, their 16th studio album. Recorded after surgery, the CD demonstrated John's resiliency. Despite ongoing speculation regarding his tour plans, John insists that, for the time being, he is just concerned with doing performances that live up to his lofty expectations. The road to rehabilitation has been long and winding, as John has acknowledged. He has expressed in interviews how devastating it is to have trouble with something that was previously second nature to him, but he is also resolute in his mission to satisfy his admirers and himself. Jon Bon Jovi has dealt with more than one public health issue, including this degradation of his voice cords. It was during the epidemic that John received the diagnosis of COVID-19. Were you aware of this? Actually, according to some reports, he started to notice his vocal problems about this period. A fan event in Miami, Florida was supposed to see Jon Bon Jovi play on October 30th, 2021. Many had come to witness his intimate performance in the hopes of getting a closer look. It was everything normal until it wasn't. A standard COVID-19 test was administered to John just before he took the stage, and to his surprise, the result was positive. As soon as he realized he couldn't play, he had to bolt off the stage. The rest of the band carried on without him. John went on record as saying he was feeling good and had been vaccinated thoroughly, assuring his fans and the media that his symptoms were moderate. But what nobody realized back then was that this sickness may have long-term effects on him and his career. His voice difficulties were already widely known when John developed COVID-19. His voice had been gradually getting weaker over the years, and fans had noted this particularly during his live appearances. His once powerful voice became weaker and more brittle, and he struggled to achieve high notes. His voice seems to have taken a lasting blow, even after physically healing from COVID-19. A few of his admirers started to wonder if the virus had further damaged his vocal cords. Since COVID-19 has been shown to impact the voice in scientific studies, this makes sense. Some singers who contracted COVID-19 have experienced long-term vocal difficulties, such as impaired breath control, diminished vocal strength, and nerve damage. The virus is recognized to induce inflammation in the respiratory system, which includes the throat and lungs. As if John's vocal cord degradation wasn't bad enough, the stress of COVID-19 just made it worse. There is a history of mental health issues for John in addition to his physical health problems. Following Richie Sambora's sudden departure from the band in 2013, John's personal life was severely impacted, and he experienced a low point emotionally. There was a lot of darkness, John said during this time in an interview. It seemed like the entire world was pressing down on me at the time. On top of that, John was embroiled in a contentious disagreement with Mercury, the record company that had delayed the release of the band's upcoming album. He became even more dependent on his wife, Dorothea, for assistance after this career failure intensified his mental health issues. In 2012, when John's daughter Stephanie overdosed, he had one of the most terrifying experiences of his life, on top of all the pressures from his work. Tragically, he got the phone call no father wants to hear. His college-age daughter had overdosed and was found unconscious in her room. Fortunately, she made it through, but John was deeply affected by the ordeal. Even though he was very successful and wealthy, he said that this event served as a wake-up call and taught him that unexpected events may happen to anybody. He went so far as to declare it the worst moment of his life. Jon Bon Jovi kept going even when things became tough. In times of despair, he turned to his loved ones for support, channeled his feelings into his music, and discovered methods to press on. Although he has learnt to cope, he has acknowledged that he has never really overcome some of these difficult periods. Even the most seemingly perfect persons can have problems with their bodily and mental health. He is a living example of that. Above all else, he exemplifies the fact that a path may be discovered. The life of Jon Bon Jovi is about more than just music. It is also about overcoming adversity, staying strong, and refusing to give in to despair. His music, performances, and message of perseverance will live forever in the hearts of his admirers. His status as a legendary rock vocalist will endure in perpetuity, regardless of his future endeavors. Are you in agreement? Are you looking forward to Jon Bon Jovi's return to the stage? Feel free to leave a comment with your opinions, and be sure to subscribe for future video updates.